It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. I'm Craig Hoffman. That is Logan Paulsen. Thanks so much for finding us, whether you're listening or watching on YouTube. We very much appreciate it. We hope you like what you hear. And if you do, make sure you subscribe. It's okay. I'll remind you to do it again later. But Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the Odyssey app, YouTube, wherever it is you're watching or listening, make sure that you are subscribed for all of the latest content. Today on this here edition of the show, we are going to talk NFL Combine. Logan has finally made it back. I've been back since last Friday. Obviously made the trip. Logan was supposed to get back nice and early yesterday, Monday, as we record this. Had some flight issues, bro. Not
correct.
A good time.
Yeah, they had to fix the plane. So it's a little disconcerting when you see the mechanic like on the tarmac, like undrilling the panel on the engine. You're like, hopefully that goes well. So we made it back. Good for him.
Yeah, good job, mechanic. That is the funny thing about flight delays. Not to get on too much of a tangent here, but like you're like, this sucks, but it's probably better than the alternative, which is just going through with this faulty plane. So it is what it is.
Yep.
My only flight issue coming back was we didn't have a gate and then we didn't have a jetway operator, which now I chuckle at because that happened to us when we flew to England. But in England, they don't call them jetways. They call them jetties. And so now in my head, I'm just like, we're waiting for the jetty operator.
There's that accent again.
But that's apropos of nothing. All right. So here's what we're going to do. We were both at the Combine. We're going to talk about some of the high-level stuff, that kind of our takeaways as we left, conversations that we had, et cetera. And then we're going to do a deeper dive on the two main position groups that have been linked to the Commanders at 16. Offensive line, corner. I thought there's some really interesting stuff that happened, specifically at corner. Logan obviously watched every single drill, every single guy in person because he was still there for the workout portion of the Combine. But Logan, let's just start. Like, you get there, you see some old buddies, guys from around the league. What are the conversations like that you're having over the course of the past week?
Well, it's interesting, and I think this is something that is always a good reminder, is just how people are when they're talking about the draft, like how they're distributing information. You know what I mean? So it's like if they're telling you something, like what is their motivation for telling you something? Like, do they really feel this way, or are they kind of trying to change a narrative? The other thing is, like, I've got some really good friends that are very honest with me, and the other thing that is always kind of interesting in those conversations is all of the personal information about the prospects that the public isn't necessarily privy to. That, PFF, all these mock drafty kind of draft companies are not privy to. And it's amazing to me the stuff that these schools are able to keep quiet about some of these guys. Not that it's bad, but it's just like kind of these little personality quirks, or, somebody's bipolar, somebody's taking medication for whatever. And you're just like, holy cow, like that. And that is something that really impacts the draft process. So, when the draft rolls around, you say, why isn't so-and-so getting drafted? Like, there's a huge portion of information that we as a public are not privy to, that these teams are super, super dialed in on. So those conversations are always interesting, what people are giving you, and also kind of their motivation for giving it to you.
Yeah, no, that stuff is always super interesting. And that's when teams have to be realistic with themselves. Like, if someone's got something that they're dealing with, but they know how to deal with it, and, with the proper support, like, they're going to be the guy that we saw on the field on Saturdays, on Sundays.
Correct.
Then That's on the team. But if the team is like, I don't know if we can handle that, that's their loss, and says something about you as an organization and the infrastructure you have in place, the human infrastructure as well, in terms of support systems, all that kind of stuff. Your sports psychologist, your medical team, whatever. But that kind of stuff. And like you said, it's not always incidents. Like, that this guy got in a bar fight, or this guy did this thing or that thing.
Yeah.
It's like, he's a little difficult to coach, or he's, you got to make sure he's motivated in this way.
Like standoffish in the meeting, even stuff like that, it shows up. And then you kind of say, well, why is he being standoffish? Do we need to follow up? And, it's just really interesting. I think, the stuff that comes out, and, the stuff that, like his coach said this about him, or, there was this thing that happened in college and we don't think it's a big deal. We don't think it's the term they use. We don't think it's fatal, right? Fatal being that, like, he's not a draftable prospect now, but there's always
comes off the board.
Yeah. Someone's got a little bit of baggage. Like, I remember talking about a couple prospects, and this gentleman was like, oh yeah, he's an absolute psychopath. And like, that has never come out about anything. You know what I mean? So it's just, and I'm not going to tell anybody about these kids because that's not my place to tell them, but it is interesting in terms of like your evaluation, and like you're like, oh, I'm super high on this guy. They're like, I wouldn't be. And it's not because of the tape, it's not because of the workout, it's because of, you know, the interview process and the stuff that they've turned up in the investigation. So that's always super interesting. And the other thing I want to bring up, it's also really interesting, like guys that are really forthcoming with me kind of year round are all of a sudden starting to become a little bit more guarded. And I think that's another thing about this time of year, and you know, why it's important to keep that information close. And again, it kind of feeds into that narrative of why is person X telling me when person Y is being so guarded? Are they trying to get me to report something? Are they trying to get me to tell the commanders about that, or whatever it is? You know what I mean? So it's always a really interesting time in terms of navigating those contacts and what's real information. I think it's all real information, but I guess like what is the motivation, the genesis for that distribution of information?
Welcome to my world, pal.
I know it's tough.
That's I mean, it's funny because I've had this conversation with multiple people, and now I've kind of brought it to the air as well on the radio show about the ownership situation of like, no reporter is reporting stuff they've made up.
Right.
The question is, can the reporters suss out why person X is telling them thing Y, and whether it's actually worthy of reporting, or is it worth just sticking in your back pocket as like, oh, they're trying to spin me because they're trying to increase or decrease the price. They're trying to, you know, get the NFL to apply pressure because if this thing becomes public, then they'll shove Dan along, and, you know, maybe he's being stubborn about this one particular thing or whatever. It's happening from both sides. And so that motivation, especially, and it's funny because I've actually made the comparison to this time of year for free agency and the draft. Like, we've entered silly season.
Yeah.
We've entered this time of year, and the same thing is true with the sale, where like, because it's close, because we are now at crunch time, people are trying to push their narrative in that last little bit of tug of war before we get to the actual conclusion, the resolution of whether it's drafting, whether it's a signing of a player, whether it's obviously the sale of the team. And thus, you've got a lot of powerful people in the ears of a lot of reporters, and, you know, they're trying to figure out what they can get out to help their side. Speaking of, the conversations I had at the Combine typically were one of two things. And a lot of mine were more of like media folks than talking to some NFL folks, which I certainly had some of those conversations, but talking to a lot of media folks. One were questions about the sale. And obviously, as that continues to go, we will cover it here on the podcast, but also ongoing coverage on the Hoffman Show. Make sure you subscribe to my channel on YouTube as well, at Craig Hoffman, if you're not, to get some of that. And of course, on the radio, 3 to 6 every day. But it was that, or the other one was, are they really going with Sam Howell? And it was
I got
funny
that a
because
lot. Yeah.
for some people, that was a very exciting thing.
Yeah.
You're like, wow, I can't believe they're actually going with Howell. Like, I love that. I think he's going to be awesome. And some people are like, are you serious? He's a 5th round pick. And when you frame it this way, it does seem kind of nuts. Rivera's in a win now situation. Like, he's got to win this year. And he is going with a guy who's thrown 19 NFL passes and was a 5th round pick. And I realize that we can dive into the caveats of, you know, well, he should have been drafted higher. A lot of people had a higher grade. You know, he's super talented. They do have a year on him to like understand who he is on some level. They like what they saw, like all of those things. But at the end of the day, in a year where Ron Rivera's got to probably make the playoffs and maybe even win a playoff game, he is relying on Sam Howell. And once you kind of get out of the Commanders media bubble where we've all just accepted that that's what it is, people, the disbelief that I was met with when I was catching up with old friends and colleagues was pretty hysterically funny.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because, like, you know, you go around and that Sam Howell does come up quite a bit. You know, they know I work for the Commanders, and they're like, oh. And when you talk to scouts, they're like, oh, man, I loved him. You know what I mean? I had a 2nd round grade on him. I had a 1st round grade on him. So obviously there are people around the league that really like what he did and think that he's going to be a productive player. I do think that it's important to acknowledge that the team they're going to look at other quarterbacks.
Of course.
His section it just happened to be right below where the Commanders were, their boxes, and all the coaches are in there and they're looking at quarterbacks, you know, and I think that's just good process, obviously, but it's also saying, like, you know, Sam is going to have a chance to win the starting quarterback, but we are going to look at all of our options. You better believe they're going to kick the tires on some of these free agents. I know we talked about they're probably not in the market for those Jimmy Garoppolo's, Derek Carr type guys, but they're going to kick the market on a good free agent quarterback. If one of these quarterbacks that they like falls to them at 16, I'm sure they would consider it. I'm not saying they're going to draft a quarterback or anything like that, but just because of good sound process, they're going to exhaust all options here. You know what I mean? And like we'll talk about the quarterbacks maybe tomorrow or at some point, but Thursday, whenever the next show comes out. But I do think there is a conversation to be had there about this class. And again, so no one mishears me. I'm not saying they're going to draft a quarterback, but they're definitely looking at the quarterbacks and completing an evaluation on the quarterbacks so they can make the best decision for the team this upcoming season.
Totally. And we had a nice, cute conversation on the radio show last week about what should they do if Anthony Richardson falls to 16. All right, no way that dude's going to 16 with where they are right now. Now the bigger question is, like, would they consider trading up if he fell to like 10?
Which I think is a mistake, though. I don't think he should go as high as he's going to go. So everyone talks about the physical traits of him, and like he's a unicorn. Like there's never been a quarterback like him ever in the history of the NFL Combine. Great, huge hands, big kid. He was taller than they thought he was going to be. He was heavier than they thought it to be. He was faster. He jumped higher. Like it was literally like the bionic man. And I had a scout tell me, I think he should play tight end. And I said, oh, you don't think he'll play quarterback? I said, he is so raw at the quarterback position. There was a scout, I forget who the scout was, from a different team, but he was like, he is so raw that just take the athlete. If you think he's that athletic upside, like that's what we're talking about here. So everyone has been watching, NFL Network, watching ESPN. They've seen him throw that beautiful fade ball 60 yards in the air and it lands on a dime. For the rest of those like routes on air, it was pretty hit or miss for him. He missed a couple slants. He missed a couple big outs. Like his big thing is his completion percentage was 47% last year. That's like historically bad. He can like barely, like when you're evaluating Florida receivers, it's like, is the ball even catchable? Like he does have things that get you excited. It's like having a player in Madden that is physically 100 and everything, but like awareness is like 5 or 10. And I'm not saying he's a dumb guy. I'm just saying he's playing 1 year of quarterback. Does he have upside? Absolutely. Do people compare him to Josh Allen? All the time. But he has a lot of growing to do. And that's a big ticket, big price tag to be taking a guy in the top 15 who's got a lot of growing to do.
I remembered Allen's completion percentage was real bad at Wyoming. So I went and looked it up. He was 56%. So much, much higher than Richardson. I don't know, man. I'm kind of on board on the Anthony Richardson.
So I had a conversation with somebody. I had a conversation with somebody. It's like, what's the most important thing about playing quarterback? How fast your 40 is? How high you can jump? It's how well you throw the football. And like that is by far his worst thing. I mean, he can throw it far. Don't get me wrong. He's got like that ball flies out of his hand, and you can see why people love it. But if he can't read a defense, if he can't be accurate, like shouldn't that be weighed more at the quarterback position than how fast he's running?
But I think people get. We'll go into this deeper tomorrow.
Yeah, later.
Whenever.
Yeah,
but like the thing that I'll say about Richardson is this: his floor is really high, and people miss that. Because the modern NFL, where teams are less afraid than ever to run the quarterback, and they will be especially not afraid to run him if he's 6'4", 240. Mm-hmm. Like you see what Hurts does, you see what Lamar did, like you see Fields, like Justin Fields. Fields is probably the best comparison for him. Like Cam came out and had a 4,000-yard season as a rookie. Like Cam was much more polished as a passer, much better as a passer, much better as a prospect overall. He's probably the closest thing athletically, and Richardson kind of blows him out of the water, which is nuts because Cam was a monster. But Fields stylistically is probably the guy that's closest. Inconsistent as a passer at best, sometimes just flat out poor. Doesn't really want to pass the ball, it seems like sometimes. He's just content to drop back if first read's not there, take off. But how many times did the Bears score 30 last year? Like that offense can work in the NFL, and Fields did it without any help. And so, yes, it's easy to see like, okay, if they could clean up his mechanics and he's a smart guy and like can put the mental side of playing quarterback together because he's barely done it. He just doesn't have the reps. Like if you want to give him that version, fine. But he's also like, if I'm Atlanta, I'm taking him because their run offense is just going to get better. Like it was good last year. Imagine what it is with that dude. And they will bring him along as a passer in the way that few other teams probably would. It can be slow, but also effective from jump because he's such a threat as a runner. And I think that's that's what people miss when they look at a guy like Richardson. They look at a guy like Fields and like, oh man, if he can put it together, what about the ceiling? And what they don't realize, and Renner said this last week on the pod, I'll give him full credit for this, like, is that the floor is really high because the value of the scramble and the value of a runner at the quarterback position is way higher than people ever gave it credit for.
I totally agree with that. I do, but I just think like even Justin Fields was a more prolific passer, more efficient passer, more accurate passer in college,
Sure.
And so is the upside there? Like, absolutely. Is the upside as a runner there? Absolutely. Like, look at what Lamar has done in Baltimore. And Lamar was more proficient than both those guys in the passing game. I just think you need a semblance, just kind of a foundational football understanding, And I think I haven't talked to him. I'm just going based on what I've seen. He's still very green. He's still very raw. So my question is like, yes, he's a great runner, but like, can he learn? Can he develop into something that is worthy of a top 10 pick? And, when you draft a quarterback in the top 10, like they're coming in to start. They're like the face of your organization. Look at the past 10, 15 quarterbacks that have been drafted in the top 10. Like they are iconic names in the draft. So I just look at that and I say, like, does he have the acumen to get that done? And I'm not sure that there's a definitive, I can't definitively say no, but I can't definitively say yes either. But if I was a gambling man and I'm a conservative guy, I would be very, very leery of that. I know a lot of teams are probably going to be doing a lot of due diligence on this, but that's something I would kind of be like, let's just pump the brakes on this. I know this is exciting. I'm excited about it. Shoot, when I was watching it, I was like, can you believe this guy? Like, holy cow, he is a physical freak. He looks like a giant on the field next to other big men. And so you're kind of like, he is one of one physically, but what are those traits that make quarterbacks elite? And does it really matter that he's a physical freak? Does that make sense what I'm saying? Like,
you are a very risk averse football man. That is definitely your style, but you're not wrong either. I just think,
and I agree. You bring up a great point. And this is something that I think will be interesting to keep an eye on as we get closer to the draft, because something will come out, a mock draft by Daniel Jeremiah, a mock draft by Mel Kiper, and he will be either lower than people expect or higher than people expect. And that's because he's talked to NFL teams and they've given him their scoop that I was getting last week on different players around. You know what I'm saying? That'll be an interesting data point to watch over the next couple of months.
Yeah, no, those big guys who kind of mix with information and tape are definitely why their mock drafts are a little bit more intriguing. Dane Brugler from The Athletic, guys like that, kind of the top guys at those big companies. They have a little bit more information than plenty of guys who do a great job breaking down the tape, but don't necessarily have that kind of background. The one thing I'll say with Richardson is he doesn't have a lot of reps either. And like that obviously makes it hard to evaluate, but like what happens when he gets them? And I think that's ultimately the question that teams are trying to answer. And we can obviously talk more about that and what that looks like. And also like, where are the fixes? What are the reps going to improve? Because there's some stuff that it won't, like, it's just who he is. And there's some stuff that it might. On the acumen side, I will say I watched it's a made for TV segment made to make the kid look good. It's produced by NFL Network, but he sits down at a whiteboard with Steve Mariucci and it's like, call my play. And so it's a little bit of a mock interview, but Mooch gives him a play. He's like, this is what we called it. He's like, this slot guy, you know who he was for me? It was Jerry Rice. You heard of Jerry Rice? It's like, yeah, I've heard of Jerry Rice. And so, but he did a great job with it. Now, is it basic stuff? But like he didn't, it was West Coast terminology. He'd never done West Coast before. So like, you're like, okay, he seems pretty put together. It's just, he hasn't done it a lot.
I mean, that's what people were saying about Trey Lance too, and and Trey Lance has been hurt. There's been a lot of things that have slowed his growth, but when they don't have that, quarterbacks especially, it's such a mental position. When they have that piece, it makes me very leery. And I would be super excited, in that kind of late first round area. But I think he, because of this, his value is going to be bumped up to kind of like Walker was last year. He tested really well at the combine. He was kind of like a 16 to 20 pick, the defensive end for Jacksonville now.
Oh, Trayvon Walker.
Trayvon Walker. And then he did go to the combine and he got overdrafted. And I think that's kind of what you're going to run into here a little bit.
Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. I'm Craig Hoffman. That is Logan Paulson. We'll do more on the quarterback position overall tomorrow, but let's get into offensive line.
Sure.
Really interesting group. We came in kind of thinking there were 3 tier 1 players, like, and I don't know what, and I'm using tier 1 as a generic term here,
Yeah.
not as like hey, I put grades on them and there's
Sure.
a line at 92 and that's when we drop off from tier 1 to tier 2. But there's a group of 3 that were all kind of equal at the top, and then there's another group down that's got somewhere between 3 and 8 names in it, let's say.
Sure.
Where are we after this combine, and how confident are you that one of those top 3 are going to be available for Washington at 16?
Yeah, so I think let's just talk about the top 3. So Paris Johnson came in and he didn't run a 40, but he did all the field work and he measured. And so he measured at basically 6'7", so 6'6" and 3/8, 218 pounds. He had 36-inch arms, which is
318, not 218.
318, excuse me, yeah. And he had 36.25-inch arms, which is insanely long. Like DeJuan Jones has the longest arms ever measured at the combine. I think they were 36.5, so he's like shorter, longer arms. He's twitchy, like a twitchy athlete on the field moving around. He strains a little harder than I'd like, but he's young. He's like 21, just turned 21. So to me, it's like he's the guy. Like, you don't, like, tackles like that don't come along every year from a physical standpoint. Is his film raw? Yeah, he played guard last year. This is his first year playing left tackle. But, if you're taking a swing at a guy in the top 10, like, that's the guy. So I don't think he's going to be around, honestly. He'll be gone. Like, Atlanta, if they don't take Robinson, Tennessee, you know what I mean? Like, one of those teams will take a swing on him. Skoronski is the guy from Northwestern who, I don't know, I was a little disappointed with his performance. Like, everyone was telling me he was this tremendous athlete. He jumped well, 34 inches. I think he had like a 9 or 10-1 broad, which is good for an O-lineman, and had like a 5'1" 40. Field drills, he was a little stiffer than I thought he'd be. So a little disappointed. I think he's probably, like, in my mind, a guard now. So I think he probably slides a little bit. And I think he's probably there for Washington at 16. There's an opportunity potentially. I know Mike Renner mentioned him last week when we talked to him, and I think that's probably more likely now than it was before. Now, his tape is impeccable. It's one of the most flawless sets I've ever seen. His hand placement's excellent. His anchor's excellent. So,
and he was playing left tackle, right?
Playing left tackle.
But could he potentially slide over to right tackle, at least for a year, and then pop over to left, if you move on from Leno after next year?
He strikes me as a guy who can kind of do a little bit of everything. Like, they brought him in to play center. He played guard. He played tackle. I will say they do pass sets right and left. His stuff on the right didn't look as crisp as his stuff on the left, but think about it. He's taken, 5,000 pass sets on the left. So I like his film a lot. So I'm willing to kind of like push some of the athletic. They're not even that they're concerns. I just thought he was going to be like a hyper athlete. I thought he was going to be like a sub-5 guy. Thought, the vertical matches up. Thought the broad was going to be, and I thought the field work was going to be awesome, but he was a little stiffer than I would have liked. So take that for what it's worth. But I think 16 was good value for him. Broderick Jones is the other guy from Georgia, and I've not been super high on him. I think the NFL is kind of it with me on this. I think he's probably the best athlete of the group. I think he ran the fastest 40 or one of the fastest 40, like 4.98, something like that. He measured in taller. He was 6'5.5", and he was listed at 6'3" in college. And he came in at like just over 300 pounds. He ran well, stiffened the drill work. And I think as a result, I would kind of bump him down. The other thing about his film that really bothers me, and this is something important for fans listening, is pass protection is the thing you're drafting that guy for. As much as people want to say he's not a great run blocker, so Broderick Jones is excellent in the run game. His pass protection stuff is a little bit up and down, partially because he's a little bit high-waisted when he pass sets, and he has a hard time kind of anchoring. Like, you can visualize that, right, Craig? Someone who kind of is a little bit mushy in the middle and not great with his angles. Again, only played 19 games in his whole career. So you kind of say, well, there's a high upside play there. I think I would push him down, but if you're betting on potential and betting on upside, you probably flip Skoronski and him at 16, just to give you an idea of what's going on there. And then you mentioned that next tier of guys, that's like Darnell Wright from Tennessee, who quite frankly looked excellent, looked very twitchy. He was big. He just looks smooth in all the movement drills. They do like a wave drill where they point and direct the offensive lineman, and he just was gliding everywhere, backpedaling like a DB, and you're just like, awesome. But the guy in that second group who probably helped himself the most is Anton Harrison from Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. And he's like a basketball hyper athlete, and talk about an excellent pass protector and a terrible run blocker. Like, that's exactly what he is. He's a puppy, needs to grow into his body a little bit. But he's got the pass pro down, and he's a guy that can play left athletically. So naturally he's going to bump up a little bit. And he's the type of guy that when you mention him to a bunch of scouts, their eyes all kind of light up. And there's like a little bit, because the upside's there. There's like an elite athleticism there, an elite understanding of pass pro that gets scouts and gets coaches excited. So I think a lot of people in mock drafts, you're not going to see a name like that at 16. I think that's still a little high for him. I think that's high for Darnell Wright as well. But if you're going to trade back out of that group, like kind of in that 18 to 25 area, I would not be surprised to see either one of those guys go. So if that makes sense.
No, that's good insight. And it's interesting. Like, fans are starting to do, like the Draft Nick fans are starting to do a lot of their own, like, check out my mock draft. And I'm like, how are you drafting guys 7 rounds deep? Y'all got,
it's crazy.
Y'all got work to do. But if you watch a lot of college football and like you read a lot of stuff, like you can know. I mean, it's interesting too, because like at this point, I'm like, I don't watch a ton of college football, but I know a lot of these names. Guys that are getting looked at in the 4th, 5th, 6th round for Washington. But I've seen a lot of people mocking trades for Washington at 16.
Yeah.
And Mayhew talked about it a little bit last week. He's like, for value purposes, what you find is when you trade up, like you better be right, because you're obviously moving up for a guy that, that you're higher on than everybody else. And so if you're right, like, sure, it can work out. But like from a value sense, trading back tends to be a lot more successful of a plan. And I think for Washington, especially getting or not having that their natural 3rd round selection because of the Wentz trade, they would love to recoup that. They have a 3rd round selection, but it's basically a 4th. Like it's an early 4th because it's a compensatory pick at the end of the round that comes from the Brandon Sheriff contract signing in Jacksonville. So I think that for them, a trade, especially if those 3 guys are gone, a trade back into the 18 to 25, take your guy out of the next group, like makes a lot of sense, because the way this draft could fall, there's going to be some potential guys available that don't like, there's going to be some edge guys, for instance, that might fall into that range. Let's say like Myles Murphy starts falling into that range. There's going to be another team that wants Myles Murphy, and the Commanders should not draft Myles Murphy. You already are overloaded at that position. Now, would that make it easier to trade Sweat or Young? Sure. And if you want to make that argument, like, I guess I'll hear it. But like, let's say Myles Murphy or Tyree Wilson, who I've seen mocked as high as 3, but like, let's say one of those guys that's not Will Anderson starts to fall because all the O-linemen and all the corners start to go and there's a run on those positions. Well, now all the guys the Commanders wanted are off the board, and you're sitting there going, we're a little rich for the guys that we really want, but someone else wants whatever. So I think that's really possible.
Well, another thing I wanted to bring up here, then you kind of alluded to this, is like, how do you tier your draft? And what I mean by that is like, what are your buckets of players, right? So like, let's say for example, like for me, just after the combine, and again, I got to go back and watch some film and kind of continue my evaluation, talking to people, whatever. So right now it's like Paris Johnson, maybe Skoronski are in the same bucket, right? So if you have an opportunity to like get one of those guys, great. But then you get to your second bucket, which is some guys we just talked about. It's, the Broderick Joneses, the Antonio Harrison, Darnell Wright, DeJuan Jones from Ohio State, the big guy that everyone's been talking about. They're kind of all in the same bucket. So if it's 16, you can pick 4 of those guys. Technically, you could probably trade like 6 or 7 spots back and be relatively confident you're going to get one of the guys from that bucket, even if there's a run on tackles, right? Which is kind of what they did last year with Jahan Dotson. Like, there was a lot of good information saying they liked Chris Olave. But if you have Chris Olave and Jahan Dotson in the same bucket, right, and that, there's probably 3 or 4 other receivers you like there, you trade back and you can still get someone from the same bucket, then it works out fine. So that's kind of what you're talking about, right? Like, trade back, get into the right bucket, get into the right guys you want to talk about. And that applies to positions across the board. So we're talking about offensive line here, but the NFL team will bucket, like in that first bucket, let's say Paris Johnson and, Christian Gonzalez is a corner. They're in the same bucket. So like, if I'm trading back, I want to make sure I can get one of those 2 first bucket players, right? And then second bucket, third bucket, all the way down. And as you go, obviously the buckets get bigger and bigger because more people fall into the 4th bucket as opposed to the first bucket, right? Because those are the the big
Right.
time kind of game changing players. So I think that's kind of what to think about, is that in that second bucket, there's probably, I mean, there's 4 tackles we just mentioned. There's I would put Matthew Bergeron in that same bucket. So there's 5 guys in that second bucket that you feel, for tackles specifically, that you
Mhm.
feel pretty good about, right? And I think I would put Jalen, the kid from Maryland, I forget his last name, Jalen Duncan in a
Yep.
third bucket. But like, that's a 5-guy bucket right there for just tackle, that you're saying, as
Right.
long as we
And
can hit one of those guys at 48, or if we trade back, then you feel good about it.
right. Are there any guards that go in that same bucket, or is guard 2 not quite as valuable as tackle and thus doesn't qualify for those top 2 buckets?
Yeah, so I think there would be a couple guards potentially in there, depending on who you talk to. So obviously there's the big fella from Florida, Osiris Torrance, who, when you watch his film, he's not hitting a lot of home runs. And what I mean by that, it's like not a lot of knockdowns. The pass pro is a little bit messy, but he just wins reps. Like, he just is in the good position. He went against the guy from Georgia, Jalen Carter, and
Mhm.
kind of just locked him down. And so you say it wasn't always pretty. It was kind of messy. He's fallen down sometimes, but he's consistently winning pass protection reps and in the run game. And so I don't know if I'd put him in that tier 2. And again, this is where you get weird with positional value. Like, tackles are inherently more valuable than guards, right? So I think if Torrance is gonna slide down, I think he's still a good football player, right? In that same kind of guard bucket. So whether that's 2 for you or 3 because it's guard and positional value, we talked about that with Mike Renner a little bit the other day. There's Steve Avili from TCU, who's excellent. He moves
Mhm.
very nicely, had an excellent field session. Cody Mock has been very, very impressive. And a guy that I'll just throw in there, because I watched this film a little bit and he was excellent on the field, is LSU guard Anthony Buford. Now, no one's talking about him in the third bucket or that second bucket for guards, but me. I think there's some off the field stuff going on there, and that's probably why you're in that situation. But again, there's 4 guys right there that you're like, oh, okay. And then there's centers in there too. There's Schultz, there's Tippmann, there's Whippler from Ohio State. They're all probably in that same bucket. So think about it. That's like 10 guys. You
Yeah.
feel good probably. And I think if you're Washington, you say there's 5 tackles in bucket 2. There's 4 guards, maybe 5 guards and 3 centers. There's 15. There's, what is that? 4. There's 10 guys. There's a pretty good likelihood one of those guys will be there at 48. And so you feel pretty good about that, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Which obviously affects your decision making at 16. It affects whether or not you trade back in the first round. The one thing I'll say to wrap up this section real quick, though, is like going back to Skoronski. If a field drill where it's like 2 reps of a drill
Yeah.
is gonna make him drop, when every other indicator says he's the guy that is on tape, sign me up for that every day of the week. Like, because we are dealing with incredibly small sample sizes at the combine.
Sure.
And that, by the way, goes for the athletic testing as well. Like, you stutter on one step of the 40 and you lose a tenth of a second. That's the difference between 4.9, 5.50 for an offensive lineman, and we're talking about one of the best versus like, he's just an average athlete. Like, the margins are very, very small, and they can be caused by a lot of different things. Obviously it didn't really affect his final time that much, but Anthony Richardson probably could have broken 4.4 if he had just run in a straight line.
Right.
Like, he ran 4.43 running a little
Like
mini S.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so there's things like that, by the way, teams look at this stuff because they actually watch tape of all the drills, and they want to see. You guys did a great job on Command Center with my guy Chris Gores, who was obviously on the pod with us last week, breaking down some of what to look for. But like, teams actually watch the tape of how guys get in and out of cuts, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But if you see it on film, like, who knows? Like, they're sleeping in hotel beds. Maybe the guy Skoronski had a bad bed and slept wrong on his hip, and that's why he was tight. I'd much rather rely on the tape. Like, obviously you want everything to match up. And we'll see how he moves at his pro day. But like, one thing is inherently, or 2 reps of a drill is a very small sample size. And I understand that it's an important part. I'm not even trying to undersell it. It's an important part of the evaluation because everyone's on the same field, theoretically, the same playing field, or literally they are on it, but theoretically they're on equal footing. And thus, when a guy falls based off of one small thing and the tape is like, no, he's pretty good, and like that wasn't an issue before, I would say probably more often than not that's going to work out. And if Peter Skoronski is available at 16, I think Commanders fans will be very happy, and I think that their happiness will be validated for years to come.
I think that's absolutely right. And like, so when I say that he wasn't, so I guess what I'm saying with that is the film's good, but he's undersized. So you're
Mhm.
hoping that he comes out and looks like electric, just not even electric, just looks smooth. And so when it doesn't, you're kind of like, does he have the athletic traits to be Rashawn Slater? Because essentially their measurements are very similar. And Rashawn Slater was like a 4'8" guy, I think he was like a 37, like he did a lot of really dynamic, explosive things. The field work was like buttery smooth, and you're just kind of hoping for something like that. But to your point, I think another guy to talk about is Blake Freeland from BYU. He's 6'7", he's 315 pounds, I think, and he like crushed the combine. He had a 37-inch vertical. He broke the record for offensive lineman. He ran a 4.9. He did all these things that were physically very good, right? Field work was a little bit choppy, but the explosive stuff was there. But then when you watch the film and you watch him at the Senior Bowl, you kind of realize that he's going to have a hard time in pass protection at the next level because he just doesn't have that kind of that play strength to sink his hips and anchor versus good bull rushers. So in terms of, I'm not saying take Blake Freeland over Skoronski. I'm saying if I'm just not as confident. Like I was super confident in the tape of Skoronski, and now just because the athletic measurements they're close, but they're not quite there. I think he's probably a guard, which again depreciates value, right? And I think he's going to be an excellent guard. And this organization's had a lot of success drafting tackles with guards. Brandon Sheriff being Exhibit A. I think he's that kind of player. So at 16, if he's there, I think you're ecstatic. But prior to the draft, prior to the combine, I didn't think he was going to get down here. Now I think there's a world where that could happen, more reasonably happen, I guess is what I'm saying. And it's not to say he's a bad player. I just want to make that perfectly clear.
Yeah. I think the mock draft stuff is going to be really interesting on him in the next couple of weeks. Like I did a prediction yesterday of like the 10 players I think are going to go top 10. I actually did 11 because I said if Jalen Carter and this thing plays out in a way that's bad, like obviously he drops out. And if he does, then I think Miles Murphy will take his spot in the top 10. Obviously not in the same exact draft position, but that was my bonus guy. But Skoronski was on it. And I think
that's reasonable.
Yeah. I might wind up missing that one. It might be Paris Johnson, but we'll see.
So between the two, just based on the combine and based in the film too.
Yeah.
Paris Johnson's one of those guys that's he's got that skyscraper upside, because of the physical traits. And as much as we don't want to say it, like there are good times to bet on traits. And like, if you look historically, like offensive linemen with longer arms tend to play a little bit better. If they're, 6'6" plus, they tend to be a little bit better. If they run what, I'm saying? Like you're just playing percentages. And so I think there's a chance he slips out. I think it's a better chance now than before, but I still think he's a heck of a football player.
Yeah. But what I was going to say is like, as the Mel Kipers and the Todd McShays and the Dane Bruglers and Daniel Jeremiah's talk to teams, especially in the top 10, and they're like, yeah, we actually really like Skoronski, going with the combine for you. Then like, if he's still mocked in the top 10, well, I kind of feel like we'll know that answer of whether he'll be a top 10 pick or not before draft night, or whether or not he's fallen. If he's all over the place in mocks, I think there's obviously a better chance. All right. As for cornerback, here on the Take Command podcast, I'm Craig Hoffman. That is Logan Paulson. Christian Gonzalez demolished the combine.
Demolished.
Yeah, I know he was training with our guys down at Exos, guys and gals down at Exos, and they were really excited to see him perform, and sure enough, rewarded with their hard work there. I mean, he jumped 40 and a half. I think he ran 4.38. Broad was
huge too.
Was like 11 plus.
Did you see him walking around by any chance?
I don't think so.
Dude, I feel like he was taller than I was, and he's like broad shouldered and like big backed, and you're just like, you are a huge person, for being able to move that way and play DB. And it's like he's one of those guys where you watch the combine, kind of like Paris Johnson or DeJuan Jones, that just like physically you're just like, oh, like you're like just a different, or like the defensive tackle from Northwestern who ran that 4.5 at 280 pounds. Yeah. You're just like, oh, you're just built like genetically different than everybody else here. We are not the same. In a room, in a building full of genetic freaks, like you're just that much freakier.
Right. And which is why now I've got Gonzalez. Like he was a guy that was mocked to 16 a lot. He ain't going to be there. No way.
No way.
Now, the good news is that might knock Devin Witherspoon down. And if you like Devin Witherspoon, then cool. I don't think he necessarily fits here as well because he is a monster man corner. And
he does both. I mean,
yeah,
he's more
like
man, but he does both. Yeah,
press man is where he's elite.
Yeah.
As opposed to Gonzalez, who's a little more well-rounded. And Witherspoon, like, I'm sure will still be a good zone corner, but like in this system, you're not playing to his incredible strength. His superpower is undercut. But point is, like, Gonzalez stole the show. A lot of other guys performed really well. It was a really fast group, but I do think that a lot of folks might have had the top of their board change where Witherspoon was CB1 for, I think, most people, from what I could see on mocks and big boards and talking to people. And it seems like Gonzalez has planted himself in that spot now.
I mean, that's probably true, but I don't know if that's entirely fair just because, Witherspoon hasn't tested yet. Like, what if he's not going to be as freaky as Gonzalez, because Gonzalez is, I think he's like record-breaking freaky in terms of across the board. People have run faster 40s. They've jumped higher. They've had a better broad jump. But when you aggregate those three numbers together, I think he might be the best of all time. So obviously he's not going to test better, but Witherspoon's tape, and, I think this is part of it. It's like, which would you rather? Like, Witherspoon's tape is so fun to watch because of the mentality that he brings. He brings, like, it's such a dog mentality. Like he's challenging people. He's a physical tackler. Like, he's just that dude on film. And I like football players like that. And Christian Gonzalez is a good football player. He's, like, physically, it looks easy for him. Like, he never gets out of phase with a receiver. He's always in good position. Like, he never gets beat badly. Like, you know what I'm saying? And, like, to me, I love that. Like, when you compare him to Keely Ringo, like, they're essentially the same measurements. Like, Gonzalez has that field work and that hip turn that makes him an elite defensive back. So, I think it's not necessarily fair, but I totally understand why that's happening. I 1000% get why Christian Gonzalez is at the front of the line, because his film's good. His athletic measurables are excellent. His film's, like, better than good. It's good plus. It's not elite like Witherspoon's is, but it's really, really good. And his athletic measurables are really, really good. And so when you say upside at the NFL level, like, that's the guy. And I totally understand that. And I would probably flip them too on my mock draft, but I just think it's important for fans to remember, if Witherspoon happens to fall to us at 16, you faint, because I think he's that good of a football player. Now, the question is, I had a conversation with somebody. Did we talk about this on our podcast with Mike? Probably not.
I don't know. Depends on what you're about to say.
We do talk a lot. So to be fair,
talk a lot.
But I was talking to somebody, an analytics guy for the Bears, maybe. And he was saying, I would not draft a corner at 16 if I was Washington. And I was like, that's weird. What if you really like Witherspoon or Gonzalez? And he kind of went back to the tier thing. He's like, well, if it's tier A, then, and they're both in tier A and he's at 16, then draft him. But if Witherspoon is in tier B, for example, and you have 12 other corners in tier B, is the value there for you to take him at 16 when you could trade back? And I think that's a fantastic point, because this is an insanely deep cornerback class. Like, there's the kid from Maryland, Deontay Banks, is 6'2", 205, and he ran a 4.3 40. Like, his film is not quite as good as Christian Gonzalez, but physically it's there for him, right? And it's just like saying, like, Sam Smith from South Carolina. It's there's so many guys. Tyreek Stevenson from Miami. There's a million guys we could talk about in the cornerback position that are good football players. So again, it kind of supports that if they're not in that first tier for you, which I would imagine Witherspoon is, that imagine Skoronski is, then trade back at 16 and add value by getting another draft pick and one of these other guys you don't think that is that different from the player being selected.
So for you right now, understanding Witherspoon's got to test at his pro day and you're still watching the tape, yada, yada, yada. But as we tape this at almost 11 a.m. on March 7th, Gonzalez, tier 1, Witherspoon?
So. I would put him tier 1. His film is really good. I'd say tier 1. I would have him as a tier 1 corner. So if he were to fall to 16, based on my tier system, and I put Skoronski in there too as like a tier 1 player in this year's draft. Now that doesn't mean a tier 1 of all time, but if this year's draft, if they both fall to 16, there's still a lot of evaluation to go. We're going to have a conversation between drafting Skoronski at 16 and drafting Witherspoon, because they're both tier 1.
If that was the case, just on position. I think
positional value,
bigger.
Right?
Obviously, this changes dramatically in 2 weeks when free agency opens.
Correct.
Or when they make a move in free agency. So we'll know more then. But as of today, I think O-line is a significantly bigger need than corner. They're not dead at corner if they have to start the season at what they have. They're thin, and they can definitely improve, but they're dead at O-line because they don't have an O-line right now. All right, so let's see how many tier 2 guys. Let me know when I hit the
oh my God,
hit the line for you. I've got ESPN's best available list up, so I'm just going to go down. Emmanuel Forbes, Mississippi State, Joey Porter Jr., Deonte Banks, Keely Ringo, Cam Smith.
Keely Ringo's not in there for me, but he's in. But like that's one outlier. All these guys, Clark Phillips, keep going.
Julius Brents, Kansas State.
So I like him a lot. I do like he's around at a corner for me. I don't know if he's tier 2, but again, like, depending on who you ask, like somebody told me he's Benjamin St. Just to a T. Like
interesting because he's also I don't know if there's a typo, but it says safety next to his name, but he's on the corner list.
No, so he's 6. He's 6. He has 34-inch arms. He's 6'3". He's 205 pounds. He ran an elite 5'10'5". He ran an elite 3-cone drill, and I think he ran a 4.4. And he jumped 44 inches or something redonk.
Oh, yeah.
There's something like there's a little bit of hitch in his turn when he opens up, which shows up on tape, which gets me a little nervous because St. Just didn't have that. But golly, if you're betting on traits, man, like that's, like he's a physical tackler. Like you can tell he likes ball. Like,
so that's
But yeah, go ahead.
That's 7 guys. With Ringo being the outlier. Riley Moss, Iowa.
I think he's a tier 3 guy for me.
Okay, Kelly from Stanford, Jones from A&M, Stevenson from Miami, Brown from Ohio State. Any of those dudes? Are we now?
Yeah, those are probably
in tier 3.
Tier 3
okay,
guys.
So we're at Garrett Williams from Syracuse.
But you didn't even talk about like the kid from Miami or the kid, the other kid
Tyreek
from
Stevenson.
Yeah, was he in there?
I thought I mentioned him.
Yeah. So basically, like 7 to 10 guys. In tier 2.
DJ Turner from Michigan, the kid who ran the fastest 40 at the Combine.
Apparently, now the rumor is going to go in the first round. So
there you go.
I haven't watched him yet, but
and then the other thing to consider too on DBs is does a guy like Brian Branch enter your tier 1 conversation at 16, even though he's not a corner, but like can play nickel as we talked about last week, and you just go, hey. He's a football player, and as we said, I think I said this with you, although I might have said this on the radio show to someone last week. Like he's the type of player that the Ravens take, and then you're just like, of course,
of course,
he's gonna be awesome. And like, what would happen? What would happen if the Commanders took that player?
Right,
everyone just goes, wow, they took the great football player. They don't know exactly where he's gonna play, but then he'll wind up being everywhere and being awesome. That's what they did last year with the Ravens, literally with Kyle Hamilton. But the Commanders could certainly use that guy, and to have 2 of those guys because you got Curl, and you can play either of them in the post, either of them at the Buffalo. Like there's real value in that.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting, like how people I think aren't as high on him coming out of the draft because he didn't have like this crazy athletic profile. You know what I'm saying? So like. He might slide a little bit just because of this kind of not elite explosive metrics, but there's a guy where like Skoronski, like Witherspoon, the tape is just so good that I think you still bet on him to be a good football player in the NFL. So yeah, does he fit in there? Like that's a great question, but yeah, so the point is still valid. There's like maybe 2 guys in tier 1. There's 7 to 10 guys in tier 2 that are all probably starting caliber players, quite frankly. And so I think you say to yourself, like, doesn't it sound the more like we talk about it, trading back out of 16 seems like the right move if those top 2 tackles, if the top 2 corners aren't going to be there?
100%. And I think it just depends on how I'm going to pull up a mock draft in a second because I want to play this game out real quick before we go. But like, for instance, for Branch, like his production, the NFL does like a score breakdown and they have production, athleticism, and then a total score. And they list Branch for the purposes of this as a corner. He had a 96 production score.
Yeah, he's
like
good. He's excellent. He's a
which
good
is best amongst all corners. And then he had a 67 athletic score, which ranks 27th. Well, he's not a true outside corner. So like a guy who runs a 4.58 with by the way, a 1.56 10-yard split, that means he's like his acceleration is there. It just top end is not. 34.5-inch verticals, like fine. 10.5 broads, like solid.
But you know what I'm saying? It's like the explosive numbers aren't there, but again, if you were to play him exclusively at safety or at nickel, like I think you feel pretty good about it. Like think about Kyle Hamilton ran like a 4.7 last year at his pro day. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like, obviously you can be successful when you're put in a good situation to be successful. And I think he's got way better feet and way better instincts than Kyle Hamilton ever showed on tape. So like, I think he's fine. But again, like you're going to see people say that he hasn't met threshold numbers, threshold for 40, threshold for 5.10.5, threshold for vertical for playing safety or nickel, and they're going to pass on him. And that's what teams do. And it's a silly thing to do, but you have those threshold things because you're basically playing, you're doing the analytic thing. You're playing percentages, so to speak.
Definitely. So just for instance, for kicks and giggles, I pulled up Dane Brugler's mock because he put one out today. He's got Witherspoon falling to 16. So I guess if that's the case, you just stay put and you take him. But like
based on my evaluation, I have no insight on what the team's doing. Let me just be perfectly clear. This is me watching film, me watching the combine, just to be perfectly clear.
Yep. Branch goes 15. Part of the reason we get Witherspoon falling is he's got the Eagles taking Bijan Robinson. So going top 15 running back. Nolan Smith, the edge out of Georgia, is a name that you haven't seen a ton going in top 15. But like he goes, so like if the edge guys start going, Lucas Van Ness, he's got going 9.
He's been. I'm not that high on Lucas Van Ness, but he's been consistently a top 10 guy. Nolan is new because he ran a 4.39 at the combine, and his explosive measurements were insane, and that makes sense because I actually like his tape a lot. But it's like he's a weird guy because it's like, where does he fit? Is he, Hassan Reddick basically, or is he, a name and edge rusher that's small that never was productive? So I think he's got more Hassan Reddick to his game. I think he can be elite. I don't know if he gets that high because of the size concerns, but that seems like a knee-jerk reaction to combine. So again, like I don't think Witherspoon. I think Philly would take Witherspoon over Bijan Robinson based on draft philosophy.
Totally, especially if they lose Bradbury,
correct.
Which is very likely just from financial reasons. But just again to play this out, Porter goes 17. You got Cansey, the D tackle out of Pittsburgh, who's got a lot of Aaron Donald vibes, in part because he went to Pittsburgh, so everyone is lazy and makes that comparison. But like smaller guy, short arms, but unblockable. Going 18.
So let's let me just talk about him real quick. As a pass rusher, he's unblockable.
Yeah.
On first down versus the run, dude has a hard time. So, but like if he goes to a spot like Philly would be perfect for him. Go to Philly. You're a third down pass rusher. You're going to light up these guards. They're going to see nothing like you before. But we've got
we can get more into some of these guys. Tomorrow. But just like to play out the scenario, like Bucks take Miles Murphy, who somehow falls to 19. Then you get some of the wide receivers. You have Smith and Jigba. You have Michael Mayer, the tight end out of Notre Dame. Zay Flowers. And then like 23, he's got Minnesota taking Deonte Banks. Darnell Washington goes at 24, Addison at 25. But like, so 23 potential spot for one of your guys to go if you're looking at corner O-line. And then you have the run on offensive linemen starting at 28. Anton Harrison. You have Darnell Wright going to Philly at 30. DeJuan Jones going to Kansas City with the last pick of the first round. So like if you can trade back into the early 20s, you are easily getting one of those tier 2 guys. And I think that's kind of the point that we'll wrap with is like that trade back. If your tier 1 guys are gone, you are so good in tier 2 if you can find a trade partner. And that could be the tough part. Because if you're the team if everybody's got basically the same grades and there's no tier 1 guys left, no one that anyone wants to trade up for, you're just stuck.
Yes.
And that's the hard part is they're going to be right on that line. They need someone who someone else really likes that they don't need to fall. And whether that's one of the receivers, which is possible, I guess, because there's not any receivers in the top 15, which is weird and doesn't typically happen, or whether it's kind of a down year. Or one of the edge guys. To me, those seem like the two positions that are most likely to fall in the Commanders' favor where they can then trade back.
So to me, this is why Anthony Richardson performing so well at the Combine hurts the Commanders, because there was a world where he would fall to 18 and Detroit would draft him. I think 18, is that where Detroit's picking?
I believe so. I'll double check.
Yeah, so drafting, and like they have golf, he'd be sit for a year. I think that's a perfect fit for him. And so I thought to myself, man, if anyone's going to trade up, 16 is the right spot for it, because Detroit's right around the corner, and Pittsburgh's probably not trading out of that spot if they want to get Joey Porter Jr. or whoever they want to get. So I was like, that's perfect, because then you're going to have someone who's going to want to move up, trade back. It'd be perfect. But now he's done well. So our pick, the Commanders' pick at 16, loses value over the next couple of weeks, or until the dust settles on the Combine. So I think that, to me, is probably the most significant, because like you mentioned edge rusher, and I'm glad you did, but it is just like corner. It's insanely deep at edge rusher. Like we talked about the kid from Northwestern, he's not even on that list, and I think he's one of the best guys in the group. You know, he's definitely a top 5-6 guy in my eyes. I kind of like him better than Myles Murphy, but it's more like kind of your flavor of the day. They're probably in the same tier. You know what I'm saying? So if I'm a team, I'm not trading up for an edge rusher, because I know that there's all these good guys later on that I could add value to my roster with. So again, not having big receiver, Richardson performing well, it makes it, I think it's going to be harder to trade back than it has been in years past.
All it takes is one, though. Like,
true.
You need one team who's convinced that there's another team that also has Myles Murphy in tier 1.
Yes.
That's all you need.
Yep.
You're like, hey, man, we got, and look, if you can play them against each other, let's say there are 2 teams, that's even better. You can be, I don't know, let's say Tampa and Seattle. They're 19 and 20 right now, right? Or, Kansas City just let
Seattle's interesting. That's an interesting trade.
Kansas City just let Frank Clark go, and they're at 31 or whatever. But let's just go 19 and 20, Tampa and Seattle. And you tell Tampa, like, hey, look, this is Seattle's offer. Beat it. And you call Seattle and be like, this is Tampa's offer. Beat it. Give me your final offers. There's 3 minutes left on the clock. We got to do this. And you go. And that's I think the interesting thing is, like, can you get the right player with the right teams behind you, and then you're set. And then you're set. All right, we will be back tomorrow going in way more depth on a lot of these guys. Obviously, Logan chomping at the bit already. He's got pages and pages of notes on quarterbacks, on obviously some of these edge guys, and then we'll get into some of the other positions the Commanders might attack later in the draft. Running back, for instance, is one we'll probably get to. So plenty more Combine reaction, plenty more draft stuff coming here on Take Command. If you like it, not only make sure that you're subscribed wherever you're watching or listening right now, but like, tell a friend. You have friends that have similar hobbies as you that are also interested. Be like, hey, you got to listen to this podcast. Just go ahead and hit the share button right now. Be like, hey, listen to this episode. Then they're going to get to this part, and they can be like, oh, that's why you sent it to me. But now you're listening as the second friend, and you should send it to a third. Okay, you get it. All right, we'll see you guys tomorrow, Wednesday, as we record. Thursday morning, it'll be in the audio feeds, and we'll see you then. I'll Take Command. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command. First, why don't you like it? It lets other people know that it was good, and then they should watch it too. And Logan, we have a new exclusive home for full episodes.
We do. 1067 The Fans YouTube page. Go check it out and please subscribe.
Yeah, do what Logan said.
Do it.
Very, very smart.